The sounds you hear are real, frantic panting, desperate gasps for air. A man runs for his life deep in the woods, moonlight barely piercing the thick canopy. Every snap of a twig is a gunshot in the silence. He hopes he's alone, but dread tells him otherwise. Something is out there. He doesn't dare look back. This isn't fiction. It's a real voicemail, left by Alex Carter, an experienced hiker. The forest, once his sanctuary, is now his prison. The fear in his voice is not of animals, but of something impossible. The recording ends with a fall, a sharp breath, then chilling static. Alex Carter was never heard from again. To understand what happened, we must go back to the beginning of his final hike. Blackwood National Forest, by day a paradise, by night a maze of shadows and whispers. Locals tell stories, strange lights, voices on the wind, hikers who vanish. Alex Carter, a man of logic, dismissed these tales as folklore. For him, the forest's dangers were real: weather, wildlife, getting lost, not ghosts. On May 24, 2024, Alex set out for a remote area, seeking solitude and challenge. He was excited, prepared, and confident. He had no idea the whispers were real and waiting for him. Alex Carter, IT consultant by week, adventurer by weekend. He craved the quiet isolation of the forest, always prepared and cautious. Friends called him meticulous, never one for foolish risks. This trip, he ventured into North Ridge, a wild, rarely traveled part of Blackwood. He sought beauty and peace, not trouble. As he left civilization behind, he felt at home, unaware the forest held secrets beyond logic. With each step, he moved closer to a discovery that would shatter his reality. Alex's first day was perfect: sun, solitude, and the wild challenge he loved. He camped by a creek at peace as dusk transformed the forest. The next morning, he went off trail, drawn to remote hills few had seen. The terrain was tough, the silence profound. He was truly alone, yet a subtle feeling crept in, the sense of being watched. He paused, listened. Nothing but wind. He dismissed it as imagination pushing deeper into the unknown. Every step brought him closer to something that did not belong. Around noon, Alex spotted a glint of metal on a muddy embankment. He unearthed an old, heavy flashlight, antiquated, tarnished, marked only by a strange symbol. The batteries inside looked ancient yet pristine. Everything about it felt wrong, out of place. Driven by curiosity, Alex tried the switch. Nothing. It was just a relic. But he couldn't leave it behind. He slipped the heavy object into his backpack. Unknowingly, he carried with him the key to the terror that would follow. The flashlight, a silent passenger. Alex's thoughts drifted back to the strange symbol, the impossible batteries, the way it felt. A mystery his logical mind loved. He examined it in the daylight, tried the switch. Click. Still nothing. Stubbornly inert. A beautifully crafted, dead object. It felt like it was guarding a secret. The discovery changed the mood. The forest seemed to hold a different energy. Did the woods feel more watchful? The seed of unease had been planted. The feeling of being watched intensified. He took the flashlight out one last time. Useless. He tossed it into his tent, unaware of its true nature. Alex was jolted awake. The fire had died down. The forest was plunged into darkness. A twig snapped outside his tent. His heart hammered. He fumbled for his headlamp, but it was gone. His hands closed around the old flashlight. He pointed it toward the tent flap and flicked the switch. A bright beam of white light cut through the blackness. It was working. He flicked the switch off. He flicked it on again. The beam returned. Why now? The light cut a circle on the trees. He saw nothing. It was dead again. It only worked in total darkness. Alex lay awake for a long time after that, the mystery of the flashlight churning in his mind. The rational part of his brain, the part that guided his life as an IT consultant, searched for a logical explanation. Maybe, he thought, it was a photosensitive switch, some kind of technology way ahead of its time, designed to conserve battery by only working in complete darkness. It was a stretch, honestly, a wild theory, but it was better than the alternative, that the object was somehow unnatural. He was a man who dealt in code, in the predictable and repeatable laws of circuits and systems. This flashlight, though, seemed to operate on a totally different set of rules, rules he just didn't understand. He had to test his theory. It was, really, the only way to quiet the growing unease inside him. He waited, his heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm, until he was sure the moon was hidden, and the last ember of his fire was truly out. He took a deep breath, then turned off his headlamp, plunging the tent once more into that deep, disorienting blackness. For a moment he just sat there, letting his eyes adjust, feeling that familiar primal fear of the unknown that darkness always brings. Usually he enjoyed that feeling, but now it was tinged with a new, sharp-edged anxiety. He reached for the old flashlight, its cold metal surface feeling strangely significant in his hand. He held it, pointing it at the fabric wall of the tent, and hesitated. What if it didn't work this time? What if it had all just been a weird, dreamlike fluke, or worse, what if it did work? What if confirming its strange property only deepened the mystery, pulling him further away from the comfortable, logical world he knew? He was standing on a precipice, staring into an abyss of the unknown. But his curiosity, that fundamental human drive to know, to understand, ultimately won out over his fear. With a steadying breath he flicked the switch. Click. Instantly the brilliant, clean beam of light cut through the oppressive dark. It worked. His theory, as strange as it was, seemed to be correct. The flashlight had some internal mechanism that prevented it from working in the presence of any other light. He felt a small surge of triumph, the satisfaction of a puzzle solver who had found a piece of the solution. But honestly, this solution only created more questions. Who would create such a device? And why? It was an impractical, almost nonsensical design. It was a key, but a key to a lock he had not yet found. Now that he had confirmed its bizarre function, Alex felt compelled to use it. He needed to investigate the sound that had woken him up in the first place. Carefully, quietly, he unzipped the tent flap again, just a small opening to peer through. He poked the head of the antique flashlight through the gap, its powerful beam slicing a sharp circle into the woods beyond his campsite. The light illuminated the packed earth where he had walked just hours before, the nearby trees, the bed of fallen leaves. Everything looked normal. He scanned the beam slowly from left to right, a silent sentinel searching the night. Then he saw them. Footprints. They were not his own. His hiking boots had a distinct tread pattern, one he knew well. These were different. They looked like they were made by bare feet, and they were fresh. The edges were sharp and clear in the damp earth, impossible to have been there when he set up camp earlier. They started at the edge of the woods just beyond the reach of his now-dead campfire, and led directly towards his tent. A cold dread, far sharper than before, washed over him. Someone had been outside his tent just moments ago, watching him. He held the light steady on the tracks, his mind racing. Was it another hiker lost and playing a prank? Unlikely out here in this remote wilderness. A local eccentric? Maybe. But who would be wandering barefoot in the cold, dark forest? The footprints were muddy, as if the person had walked through the nearby creek. He followed the line of prints with the beam of light, away from his tent, and back towards the dense, dark wall of trees. The trail of footprints led about 20 feet away from his camp, and then they just stopped. There were no prints leading away, no sign of a person turning back. They simply ended in the middle of a clear patch of ground. It made no sense. It was impossible. A person can't just vanish into thin air. Alex felt his rational mind starting to fray at the edges. He clicked the flashlight off, plunging everything back into darkness. He needed to think. He counted to 10, his breath fogging in the cold air, and then clicked it back on, pointing it at the same spot. The footprints were still there. They were real. This wasn't a dream. A wave of nausea rolled over him. He was not alone out here, and whoever, or whatever, had been outside his tent was not playing by any rules he understood. The forest no longer felt peaceful. It felt menacing. Alex sat frozen in his tent, the beam of the strange flashlight still fixed on that impossible scene. The muddy, bare footprints that led to nowhere. He had to be missing something. There had to be a logical explanation. He forced himself to calm down, to analyze the situation like he would any other problem. He decided to conduct another test, a simple one. He kept the old flashlight's beam aimed directly at the last footprint. Then, with his other hand, he fumbled for his modern headlamp. He found the switch and turned it on. Its soft, wide light filled the tent and spilled out through the open flap. The moment the headlamp's light touched the scene outside, the beam from the old flashlight instantly died. It clicked off as if a circuit had been broken. And in the diffuse glow of his modern headlamp, something else vanished. The footprints were gone, completely. The ground where they had been just a second before was now smooth, undisturbed, damp earth. There was no trace of them, not a single indentation, not a smudge of mud. It was as if they had never been there at all. Alex stared, his mouth agape, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. He quickly turned his headlamp off. The world was plunged back into total blackness. He took a shaky breath and flicked the switch on the old flashlight again. The brilliant beam sprang back to life, and there they were. The footprints had returned, sharp and clear in the exact same spots. He repeated the experiment, a frantic, desperate cycle. Headlamp on, the old light died, the footprints vanished. Headlamp off, the old light blazed, the footprints reappeared. It wasn't a trick of the mind, it was a trick of the light. The footprints, the evidence of his visitor, only existed within the beam of this strange, impossible object. This revelation was more terrifying than finding the footprints themselves. The rules of reality, the solid ground on which he had built his entire life, were crumbling beneath him. This was not technology. This was something else, something that operated on a plane of existence he had never known. The flashlight didn't just illuminate the darkness, it seemed to reveal a different version of it. A hidden layer of reality that was invisible to any other light. The fear he felt was no longer about a stranger in the woods. It was a deeper, more existential dread. He was holding an object that showed him things that weren't there. Or perhaps more terrifyingly, things that were there but could only be seen in the dark. Panic set in. A morbid curiosity held him captive. The feeling of being watched was now a certainty. Something was standing there, a tall, thin silhouette. Alex's blood ran cold. The figure did not move. He was trapped. To see his enemy, he had to embrace the darkness. The sun rose, but for Alex it brought no comfort. The night had been sleepless, filled with terror. He sat in his tent until dawn, flashlight in hand, alternating between light and dark. Light on, an empty forest. Light off, impossible footprints and a silent figure. He had to get out, his retreat now a desperate flight. He broke camp frantically, needing to put distance between himself and this place. Paranoia gnawed at him, unseen eyes following. The hike back was grueling, every shadow mocking him. He was alone with his terrifying secret, the flashlight a cursed relic he couldn't discard. He wouldn't make it out before nightfall. He had to hide. He found a shallow cave. As the last light faded, Alex scrambled inside. As dusk settled, a profound and heavy silence fell over the forest once more. Inside the cramped, damp cave, Alex huddled in the deepest corner he could find, his back pressed against the cold stone. He was trembling, not from the cold, but from sheer, unadulterated terror. He pulled his phone out again, his thumb hovering over the contacts list. He needed to talk to someone. He needed to hear a human voice. He scrolled to his best friend's name, Mark, and pressed call, knowing it was futile. But then, a miracle. A single, wavering bar of service appeared on the screen. The phone rang. Once, twice, then a click, voicemail. A wave of despair washed over Alex. He had one chance, one precious bar of signal, and he couldn't get through. He knew the connection could drop at any second. He had to leave a message. His voice, when he started speaking, was a raw, breathless whisper, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and confusion. He described the flashlight, the way it only worked in total darkness. He tried to explain the footprints, the figure, the impossible physics of it all. He knew how insane it sounded. He could hear the hysteria in his own voice. "Mark, it's me!" he gasped, the recording capturing his ragged breaths. "Something's wrong! I found this flashlight. It shows things, Mark. Things that aren't there. There's a person, a thing, I don't know. It's been following me." He paused, listening to the sounds of the forest outside the cave. "Every time I use the light, it's closer. I don't know what it wants. I'm hiding in a cave. I'm so scared, man. I don't think I'm going to make it out of here." The signal bar on his phone flickered, then vanished. The call disconnected. He was alone again, truly alone. The failed call had only amplified his sense of isolation. Now, all that was left was the darkness and the thing that lived within it. The last of the ambient light disappeared from the mouth of the cave, plunging him into a blackness so complete it felt solid. He knew what he had to do next. He had to look. With a hand that shook so badly he could barely control it, he raised the old flashlight, took what he feared might be his final breath, and flicked the switch. The next morning, Mark woke up to the voicemail from Alex. He listened to it once, then twice, a feeling of unease twisting in his gut. Alex wasn't a prankster. He wasn't prone to exaggeration or hysteria. The raw terror in his friend's voice was genuine and deeply unsettling. Mark knew Alex was supposed to be back that evening, but, well, he just couldn't wait. He immediately called the Havenwood Sheriff's Department and played them the recording. The response, however, was not what he had hoped for. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical. They got calls about lost or spooked hikers all the time, especially from the remote North Ridge section. Sheriff Brody was a man who had seen it all. or so he thought. A 30-year veteran of the small-town force, he was practical, no nonsense, and had little patience for what he called campfire stories. He listened to the recording, his expression unchanging. He heard the fear in the man's voice, sure, but the story itself, a magic flashlight, a disappearing figure, it sounded like something out of a cheap horror novel, not a legitimate emergency call. He suspected Alex had gotten turned around, was dehydrated, and was likely suffering from exhaustion-induced hallucinations. It was a plausible, rational explanation that fit neatly into his worldview. Nevertheless, procedure was procedure. A person was potentially missing and in distress. The sheriff assured Mark they would look into it. He dispatched a deputy to the trailhead parking lot to see if Alex Carter's vehicle was still there. It was. He then organized a small search party, a standard response. They would head out at first light the next day, Tuesday, to sweep the trails Alex was supposed to have taken. There was no real sense of urgency in his actions. In his mind, they were likely going to find a tired and embarrassed hiker a few miles off the path, with a perfectly normal broken flashlight and a wild story to tell. Mark was frustrated by the calm, almost dismissive response. He tried to impress upon the sheriff the seriousness of the situation, the sheer, unadulterated panic in Alex's voice. He knew his friend, something was terribly wrong, but to the sheriff, Mark was just another worried friend, overreacting to a strange message. The lawman's logic was simple. People get lost, people get scared, people imagine things. What they don't do is get hunted by supernatural entities with magical flashlights. As far as Sheriff Brody was concerned, this was a routine search and rescue, not the opening chapter of a paranormal investigation. He had no idea how wrong he was. Back in the cave, Alex held his breath. It was empty. He angled the beam toward the forest. It was there, much closer. The unnaturally long, slender limbs, no face. It was looking right at him. He scrambled backward, deeper into the cave and clicked the light off. He was trapped. The flashlight was somehow summoning it, drawing it closer. He flicked the light on again. It had moved, closer, with an impossible silence. The flashlight wasn't a weapon. It was bait. This shattered Alex's composure. The flashlight was luring it toward him. Panic turned to a primal need to run. He couldn't stay in the cave. He had to escape, even if it was impossible. He clicked off the flashlight, gathered his backpack and crawled toward the cave mouth. He ran blind into the forest. He burst from the cave and ran. Behind him he felt a chilling presence. It was at the edge of the clearing. There was no escape. The flashlight was the lure. Alex had a choice to make. His final night had begun. Alex stood frozen. The creature stood across the clearing. The chase was over. He knew this was where it would end. The bare, muddy footprints were there, a trail to where the figure stood. He was not just a victim, he was the unwilling accomplice. A fatalistic calm settled over him. He was going to die here. If he was going to die, he would die knowing. He raised the flashlight again. He was a witness to the impossible. He didn't run. He stood his ground. The silence was absolute. Alex and the figure stood in their strange standoff. It simply watched. It was waiting for him to use the light again, to complete the ritual. He took a step forward, shortening the distance between them. The creature did not react. He could see it more clearly now, its form a void in the shape of a man. It was a hole in the world. Alex stopped, now only about 10 feet away. He raised the flashlight, the beam shining directly on where a face should be, and he waited. Bathed in the eerie glow, Alex felt his rational world fall away. He was close to a thing that shouldn't be. The air felt cold, an unnatural chill. He could feel a static prickle on his skin. There was nothing, just a smooth, uninterrupted surface of pure black, a light-absorbing void. He thought he saw a flicker, a subtle shimmer. It was as if its presence was straining the fabric of reality. The silence was broken by a low hum from the flashlight. The light began to flicker in a strange, rhythmic pulse. With every pulse, the figure seemed to become more solid. He was feeding it. The flashlight wasn't just a key, it was an umbilical cord, pumping energy into this void. Alex understood. It was drawing him in. He had a choice: let it consume him or break the connection. With the flashlight humming and pulsing in his hand, and the figure looming before him, Alex's mind raced. He thought of Mark. He thought of the unheard voicemail, the skeptical sheriff. He couldn't let his story die here, unanswered. He fumbled in his pocket with his free hand and pulled out his phone. The screen illuminated his face with a pale, ghostly light. To his astonishment, a single bar of service flickered at the top of the screen. It was the same miracle as before, a final fleeting connection to the world he was about to leave behind. He didn't hesitate. He opened his voice recorder and hit the button. "It's here," he whispered, his voice trembling but clear, the phone held close to his mouth. "It's right in front of me now, the flashlight, it's humming, it's bringing it here. I was wrong. It's not hunting me. I'm the key. I'm the anchor." His breathing was ragged, each gasp a desperate fight for air that felt thin and useless. He risked a glance at the figure. In the pale glow from his phone screen, the beam from the old flashlight faltered. The figure flickered, its form becoming translucent, less defined. The presence of another light was weakening the connection. It was the answer. This was his final choice, the one that mattered. He could turn on his phone's built-in flashlight, a flood of normal, rational light that would likely banish the creature for good, saving himself. Or he could do something else. He could get proof. He could capture the impossible, record the truth for everyone else. It was a choice between self-preservation and a final, desperate act of witness. "It doesn't like the other light," he breathed into the phone, the words a frantic final testament. "I can make it go away, but you have to see. Someone has to see." In that last moment, Alex Carter made his decision. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was a reporter on the edge of reality. He turned the phone around, switching to the video camera. He held the old flashlight steady with one hand and aimed the phone's lens with the other, trying to capture both the beam and the dark figure standing within it. The recording begins here. It is shaky, chaotic, filled with his panicked breathing. "Look," he says, his voice cracking. "Look, it's right there." Then, he makes a final, fatal move. He takes one last step forward, plunging himself and his camera into the heart of the anomaly. The recording dissolves into a chaos of digital static and a single, blood-curdling scream. Then, silence. 2 days after Alex Carter's message, a search party led by Sheriff Brody followed his planned route. They found a cave. Inside, signs of a brief stay confirmed Alex had been there. Nearby, a volunteer found Alex's phone. The phone contained a final video file. The video showed a light beam and a man-shaped void. Alex's panicked voice said, "Look, it's right there!" Then chaos. Skepticism turned to horror. It was real. The search was called off. He vanished, leaving only a cracked phone containing impossible footage, the cause of death unknown. A month later, teenagers found an old flashlight and took it as a souvenir. They didn't know the rules. The story became a local legend, whispered around campfires. Some flashlights are designed to show you what's really there,